Hi and welcome to another Unity from Scratch tutorial for beginners. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk about arrays. Arrays are a very powerful way of grouping different data types together. And in the tutorial on variables, I briefly discussed what arrays were. So before we get started, I'll just go through the basics of arrays again. So here you can see a little diagram that I've created. Now, when we create a variable like an integer and go int score and declare it in the code, it creates a box in memory for us to put integer values in, and it calls that box score. So that's a single value. Now, if we wanted to have a group of integers stored next to each other, then we would create an array, and an array is declared like this. Now, the important thing about an array is that after the data type, in this case int, we put 2 square brackets. And I kind of remember these because they look like a little box. So we're creating an integer array, and the name of the entire array is called scores. Then to initialize that array and to set its length, we put an equal sign and then the word new, and we put int and then 5 inside of the box. So we now have 5. And what that does in memory, it creates 5 integer size boxes. As a whole group, they're called scores. Okay, so this is the name of the entire group. But to work with each single box individually, we use a index value on the end between the square brackets. So the first box is box 0. In computing, we always start counting at 0. So even though there's 5 boxes, the last box will have an index of 4. So this box here is scores 0, and then we have scores box 1, scores box 2, scores box 3, etc. for as long as we've got. Okay, so that's an array compared to a single variable. Now, arrays are very powerful because we can actually loop through them and do massive computations on the whole array in one go, and it makes the code really, really short. Now, I'm not going to go into that particular looping code in this tutorial. We'll do loops in the next tutorial. Just now, I want to show you how you create arrays and set individual values in them. All right, so we can put that away. Now, back in Unity here, what I've done is I've created a ground plane, and I put some grass on it just to make it look nice, and I've created 5 cubes. Now, these are all separate. So far, we've got nothing to do with arrays, okay? I've just created these 5 separate cubes. But what we're going to do with them is actually put them into an array. So the array needs to be created in code. But first of all, let's create an empty game object in the hierarchy to hold that code. So empty, and let's call this cube manager like that, without the T on the end. And that's just an empty object. Now let's create our script. So we go into create C# script, and you can call this anything we like. I'm just going to call it cubes, like that. And then I'm going to attach that script to the cube manager so we know that it's ready to run as soon as we press play. Okay, so let's open up this script. Now what I'm going to do is to create an array, an exposed array to put our cubes into. So public to make it exposed in the inspector. Now these cubes are game objects, so let's put game object as the type of the array. Okay, now the array needs a name. So we can call it our cubes. That will do. And then we're going to equal, actually let's not equal, let's just do that. And let's see what we get in the inspector. So we've declared that we want an array of game objects, and they're going to be known as a collective as our cubes. Now, we're not setting any size in here at all. Okay, so we'll save this and switch back to Unity. Okay, so if we go to the cube manager and have a look where our script is, because we made that our cubes public, you can see that it's exposed here. Now, we didn't set any particular size, but what's really nice about the inspector is that we can set the size in here now. So I can actually put a 5 in there because we're going to have 5 cubes, and it will then open up 5 elements, starting counting at 0. And it's expecting you to put some game objects in there. So what we can do is then grab each cube one by one and put them into each of those slots. So now we have an array called our cubes, which is 5 long, and in each element, each box in memory, it has one of our different cubes in there. Now that the cubes are in an array in our script, so here's our script. So the first cube, if you've put them into the array in order, and you don't have to, you could have mixed them all around, but we've put them in order. So the first cube, which is this one here, okay, so that's this one, and then working backwards in reverse order that they're in. So this would be our cubes 0. This would be our cubes 1, our cubes 2, our cubes 3, our cubes 4. If we want to just modify something to do with this particular cube, then this is our cubes 2. So that's 0, 1, and that's 2. So in the code, just to demonstrate that, in the start, I'm just going to add this code. And what we're doing is we're getting hold of the cube that's in the our cubes array in position 2. We're going to use its transform local scale and set it to be too high in the Y direction. Right, so when we run this, we would expect that the scale of just the middle cube is going to change. So save that, and let's go back to Unity and run. And you'll see that it's picked up just this particular cube that's in that position. Okay, so that's creating an array and putting values into it. Now you can also create other arrays that you're putting values into it inside of the code rather than dragging game objects in the inspector. To create an array in code, it's the same thing as we've already done. So we're going to create an array of colors. So we use our color data type, and let's call it colors, spelt in the Australian way. And we're going to set this right now and put values in here. So we can use color.red, color.blue, color.green, color.yellow. And I want to get 5. So what am I missing? Red, blue, green. Color.black with a semicolon on the end. So to fill an array with values, you use the squiggly brackets around the outside, and then you put each different value in separated by a comma, and that will put those values into this array. Now that's colors. If you were going to do, say, integers, so we could put int, and we might use this for some kind of height later on. Height equals, and then we could put integer values in here. So 5, 3, 2, and 8, and 4. So that will now create an array of integers which is 5 long, which is initialized with these values. All right, so now if you want to get these values out and use them on something, let's use the colors and the heights on the cube. So we've got cube 2 here, and we're using the local scale for the height. We're actually putting a 2 in, but what we're going to do instead is use the height number at position 2. So that would be height, and then we want the value in box 2. So we're aligning everything. We're putting cube 2 to height 2. Now you don't have to, you could put this to height 1 if that's the height that you want in there. But I'm just going to put 2. Now I'm also going to use the colors that we've got in that color array to set the color of the cube. So we can put this line in. We're getting cube 2. We're getting hold of the renderer with get component renderer, and then grabbing the material and the dot color. So this is how you get the color that's on a particular game object. And we're setting it to what's in the colors array at 2, which would be green. Okay, so this is 0, 1, 2, green. And we're setting the height to 0, 1, 2, which would be the 2 in that case that you can see there. Let's just change this height of 2 to 6, okay, just to make it so it's not a 2 value. So that will put 6 in here and make it 6 in height, and we're going to get green if all goes well. So let's save it, switch back to Unity and play. Okay, so we've got 6 in height and we've set that one to green. Now the final thing we'll do in this tutorial is to use all of the values in our arrays with all of the cubes. Okay, so we've got our cube. Notice that we're doing this in the start function because we don't want it to happen inside the update, which is going to loop over and over again. What we can do is grab this code here and create 5 copies of it. One, two, three, four, 5. Okay, so the first cubes are going to be 0, so we'll just change that to 0. And we want to use height 0 and color 0. Then this one will be 1, so we want cube 1, and then we're going to go to height 1 and color 1. 2 we can leave as it was, and then the 3, let's change that to 3, the height to the 3, color to 3, and the cubes for 4 and 4 for that one there. All right, so now we're actually setting each cube in order to the colors in order and the heights in order. So let's save that. And let's go back to here and run it. And there you can see that it's picked up each individual color and each individual height and put them on the different cubes in turn. Now, one last thing I'll show you is how to change the value that's in an array in the program. So at the beginning, we've initialized these values to certain things. Now, they don't have to stay those values for the whole program. In this start function, let's just, before we even set the color of the cube 0, let's change the color immediately. So colors box 0, let's just set that to color.blue, and when that runs it will overwrite this red value, and that will give you cube 0 will end up being blue instead of red. So let's just save it and go back and run, and you can see that that's happened there. Now you can also do that with the height if you want to change the height. Height at box 0, let's change that to, so it's 5, let's change that to 1. Save it and run it. And it's gone down to 1 from 5. Okay, so our code at any point can override the values that have been initialized, and you don't even need to initialize them to put values in. But one thing that you do need to do is, if you're going to start putting values in, is you need to know how big the array is. So when you initialize arrays like this, it actually knows how big they're going to be, and this is 5. And heights, for example, it's 5 as long as well. Now if you tried to initialize a value, change a value in height box 6, which doesn't exist, you're going to get an error. So if we just go, let's see, save that and run, Okay, you're getting an error. You probably can't see it because it's so small, but it says index out of range exception. Array index is out of range, which it is because it's trying to index box 6, which does not exist in your heights. So if you want to create another array, let's call this int, and we'll call it width, and we're not going to set it to anything. Okay, give it no size whatsoever. And then in here we try to do width 6 equals 1. We save that and run it. You're certainly going to get an error. Yep, index out of range. Okay, so if we go back to our code here, in order to create the widths array, even though you may not have any values right now to put in it, you can set its size. Now you could set its size in two ways. You could make it public and set its size in the inspector, or you can actually do it here by going new int, and we could make it like 10 long, in which case this position 6 would get a 1 in it. Now when you do make it 10 long like this, it initializes it and puts zeros in the entire array. So width 0, box 0 would be 0, width box 1 would be 0, width box 2 would be 0. And then after this runs, width box 6 is going to be equal to 1. So now if we save that, come back into here and run, we don't get the error. Now you're not going to see any changes on the screen because that code's not being used for anything to do with the cubes. All right, so that's arrays, that's creating exposed arrays that you can set in the inspector. That's initializing arrays with values at the time that you declare them. That's also declaring an empty array with a size and also setting individual values in that array. So that's it for arrays. I hope you've enjoyed learning about them. They're extremely powerful once you start to get the hang of them, and when you start combining them with loops that we'll look at in the next tutorial. Okay, thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.